National PSI Exam Prep, page 63 continued. 4. Debit to buyer is anything that increases the amount of money the buyer must bring to the closing. For instance, sales price, recording the warranty deed, loan origination, or discount points if paid by buyer. A. Proration based on a 365-day year or 360-day year, 30-day months. The exam will state which one to use. Rent is paid in advance and mortgage interest is paid in arrears. B. Taxes can be in advance or in arrears. C. Rents are prorated. 9. Security deposits transferred to the new owner are not prorated. Page 64. Figure 10.1. How paid items are recorded on the settlement worksheet and closing statement. Selected items, details to remember, settlement worksheet, closing statement. The selected item is sales price. Details to remember, there's nothing. Settlement worksheet is debit buyer, credit seller, and on closing statement appears on both buyers and sellers. Selected item is earnest money. Details to remember, there's nothing. Selected worksheet, it's credit buyer, debit closer. Closing statement appears on buyers only. Selected item is assumed loan amount. The details to remember: principal remaining on the loan assumed by buyer. The settlement worksheet is credit buyer, debit seller. The closing statement appears on both buyers and sellers. The selected item is accrued interest on assumed loan. Details to remember: prorated seller owes buyer for month of closing. Settlement worksheet is the debit seller, credit buyer. The closing statement appears on both buyers and sellers. The selected item is seller carry loan amount. The details to remember: reduces seller's cash at closing. The settlement worksheet, credit buyer, debit seller. Closing statement appears on both buyers and sellers. Selected item, broker's commission. Details to remember: negotiable, usually seller pays. Settlement worksheet: if seller pays, debit seller, credit broker. Closing statement: if seller pays, appears on sellers only. Selected item, owners, buyers, title insurance. Details to remember: negotiable based on tradition. Settlement worksheet, debit seller, credit closer. Closing statement appears on sellers only. Selected item, mortgage ease, lender's title insurance. Details to remember: buyer pays lender's policy. Settlement worksheet, debit buyer, credit closer. Closing statement appears on buyers only. Selected item, mortgage ease, lender's title insurance. Details to remember: buyer pays lender's policy. Settlement worksheet: debit buyer, credit closer. Closing statement appears on buyers only. So, selected item: notary fee for warranty deed. Details to remember: who signs document pays the notary. Seller signs deed. Settlement worksheet: debit seller, credit closer. Closing statement appears on sellers only. Selected item: recording of warranty deed. Details to remember: recording deed benefits buyer/grantee. Settlement worksheet: debit buyer, credit closer. Closing statement appears on buyers only. Selected item: notary fee for deed of trust. Details to remember: buyer signs promissory note and deed of trust at closing. Settlement worksheet: debit buyer, credit closer. Closing statement appears on buyers only. Selected item: tenant security deposits. Details to remember: not prorated, belong to tenants. Settlement worksheet: debit seller, credit buyer. Closing statement appears on both buyers and sellers. Selected item: rents. Details to remember: prorated, paid in advance. Settlement worksheet: debit seller, credit buyer. Closing statement appears on both buyers and sellers. Sales price. Selected item: new loan amount. Details to remember: figures from the new lender. Settlement worksheet: credit buyer, single entry. Closing statement appears on buyers only. Selected item: net loan proceeds. Details to remember: new loan closing. Settlement worksheet: debit closer only. Closing statement does not appear on either. Selected item: taxes for the preceding year if unpaid. Details to remember: credit depends on circumstances. Settlement worksheet: always debit seller, may credit buyer or closer or new lender. Closing statement: debit seller. Selected item: special taxes, special assessments. Details to remember: may be paid off or assumed. Settlement worksheet: if assumed, no entry. If paid, debit seller. Closing statement appears on sellers only. Remember, all loans are always a buyer credit. The closer could be the broker or the escrow or closing company.